Hey, what's up? It's Matt for 360 Investigations, and welcome to episode 6 of A Journey in the Making. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be going over pretty much everything food related when it comes to hiking, freeze drying, what I'm bringing, and I'm even going to be doing some cooking in this video. The main bulk of this video is going to be discussing freeze drying because there's not a lot of discussion about it and people have a lot of misconceptions about it, so I will get into that. This video is going to be extensively long, so bear with me. Before I begin, I know my hair's a mess. People keep making comments about it. So let me clarify something. It's very rare during the wintertime I ever get a haircut. Unless I'm doing a show somewhere where it requires it, I just don't get a haircut in the winter. And that's it. Simple as that. Okay, so please stop making comments about my hair. All right, let me get right into the video, starting by talking about freeze drying. Okay, so I have an edge on most hikers because I actually own a freeze dryer. So let me bring you in and show you what this contraption is. This machine is a little bit expensive. This is a $3,000 machine, or roughly around. I got this a while ago due to the food price increases and everything else. So let me explain to people exactly how this works so they can understand exactly why it's expensive. And then I'm going to go over the differences between the store-bought freeze-dried stuff and the stuff that you can make in here. All right, so first things first. The way a freeze dryer works is it does everything in a vacuum. What it will do is there are specialized heating elements on the top of these. There are orange heating pads under these things, as you can see. When the freeze dryer is doing its thing, the food gets frozen. Then the vacuum kicks on. These heating elements heat up any moisture, whether it's water, blood, whatever. It turns it into a gas, so to speak. And it sucks the gas to the outside of the freeze dryer, and then it freezes it so it can't get back in. That's how all the moisture basically gets out of this. Then, once it does that, it then starts drying the food. So it goes through a freezing process, a vacuum freezing process, a heating process, and then it goes into a drying process. That's basically what it is in a nutshell. The reason why freeze drying is so expensive is because normally in this machine, what I put in there usually takes approximately 28 to 33 hours, depending on what I'm making. So the time consumption on that is insane. But when you look at the overall elements of the time consumption compared to what you have left over, the trade-off is worth it because if it takes, you want to spend 33 hours freeze drying something so it lasts about 20 years on a shelf life, it's good. So the trade-off is actually really, really good on that element. These are Mylar bags. Okay, Mylar bags are basically tinfoil with cellophane wrapped around them. That's basically what they are. You may have seen these inside packages, and these are called oxygen absorbers. And what they do is they're put into the bags or a jar to absorb the remaining oxygen out because you want to prevent it from getting heat, light, and any type of moisture from the food. Because once you get moisture on this, the food starts turning back normal, and that's how you basically get mold and everything else. So as long as this is kept in a cool, dry place without heat or moisture, it'll within reason, it'll preserve the food for at least 20 years. So that being said, let me go over the differences between store-bought freeze-dried stuff, sorry about this, and homemade freeze-dried stuff. Okay, a lot of hikers call the bag stuff that you buy in REI, the prepackaged stuff in stores, basically bag diarrhea, because that's pretty much what it is. And if you notice, you're limited to what you can actually get. And this is because they put out their brand and everything else. Now, these freeze-dried meals that you buy are overloaded with sodium, and they have artificial proteins put into them. It's not to say that it's bad, but that's just why they're not as efficient as homemade. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to show you exactly what I'm bringing because I am freeze drying all my food and I'm going to be doing resupply for me. And the difference between store buying it and homemade is because homemade, you can pretty much make whatever it is that you want within reason. There's a few things you can't freeze dry. But more importantly, you can actually make actual food with almost no preservatives in it. And what you're eating is pure food, which is what I'm going to show you again, what I'll be bringing. Furthermore, you can also fill up the bags more than what's inside the store-bought stuff. So it's not only actual food, but it's more of it. And since there's no moisture in freeze-dried food, it basically gets it so you have less weight. So let me put this into perspective. And I'm using this as generalized numbers. Do not take this as an actual value. I'm just using this to give you an understanding of how this works. Let's say I eat 15 pounds of food a week. So what happens is I would need 7 days. Now, if you were to just go buy regular food for 7 days, you'd have probably let's say 20 pounds. But when it's freeze-dried, that weight is cut in half because there's no moisture in it. It's straight up dry because the food becomes lighter. So what happens here is I can actually take 2 weeks worth of food in place of what would normally be 1 week. So for example, if a week's worth of food is 20 pounds and I freeze dry it, that week's worth of food becomes 10 pounds. I can carry 2 weeks of food that total 20 pounds instead of 1 week at 10 pounds. So that's basically the way this sums it up. I'm showing that as an example. Don't take that as the actual weight and everything else. So that being said, I'm going to go over what I'm actually bringing, and I'm going to show you exactly how I'm going to package this. I have 3 meals that I'm taking with 1 in between. But first, you need to understand what you have to take on the trail with you, what you need. Basically, a general rule of thumb is you need about 2 pounds of food a day. So when I'm freeze drying my stuff, I'm averaging basically how many days I'm going to be on the trail with 1 bag a day, because that's basically what I'm using. So if I'm going to be on the trail for 200 days, I need 200 bags of food. Now, I'm dividing my meals up into 3 separate sections with actual food. And one of the main things with the freeze drying is because the food is already cooked, you can eat it out of the bag without having to boil water or anything else. But mainly you want to boil the water, and that's pretty much it. When you're out hiking, you need several things to keep you going. Proteins, carbohydrates, sugar, and salt. That's pretty much what you need. So to plan the food I'm doing, I looked at exactly what would give me the most protein, what type of sugar intake I can take, as well as the salt content and stuff like that. So let me get into the 3 meals that I'm bringing. And then I'm going to show you the ingredients I'm using. For purpose of this video, to keep it going a little faster, I've already prepped some of this food. For breakfast, I have actual oatmeal. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to cook it. Well, why don't you just boil water on the trail for the oatmeal? That is because what freeze drying does is it pretty much turns it into instant food. So you basically just need water and that's it. So even though the oatmeal you would normally have to cook, instead of having to cook it and then add all the ingredients to it, what I did was I cooked all the ingredients together, then freeze dried it. So all I have to do is add water. So I took regular oatmeal and turned it into instant oatmeal. But let me explain what I've done to this. Because I need extra protein during the day, I have regular oatmeal that I've added brown sugar and peanut butter to, and some milk. So I have pure protein on all ends of that. And the brown sugar takes care of the sugar intake you're going to need. So between the peanut butter and the oatmeal and the brown sugar in the milk, I have a very, 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 I don't want to say proteinated breakfast. That's not even a word. I made it up. Sounds cool, right? Okay. So the next thing I have for lunch or dinner is Hamburger Helper. Now, the Hamburger Helper has noodles in it, which give you the carbohydrates. But I also have beef inside there with gravy, which also has the salt intake. However, what I also added to the Hamburger Helper was Ritz crackers. I didn't powder them. I kind of made them into pieces, and I dumped them in and mixed them together because not only is it a filler, but the Ritz crackers will give you the salt you need because these are actual Ritz crackers. They're not generic ones. So they give it a different flavor on top of it's a filler, and it will fill you up more. And it expands the food to go a little bit longer so you get 1 or 2 more bags of freeze-dried stuff out of this. And the final thing that I'm eating for an actual meal is what I'm going to be cooking for you today. This is salmon, 3 giant pieces of salmon, which I'll show you. 2 cups of actual jasmine rice. It's not boiled in a bag. It's stuff that I had to cook. Ritz crackers, a homemade teriyaki sauce that I'll go over all the ingredients with that in. So you'll start to notice a pattern in here that I have enough sugar intake, a lot of protein, and I have more than enough food because the stuff that I can pack into a Mylar bag, the amount of protein in that is pretty much equal to 3 to 5 bags of store-bought stuff, and it's actual food, so there's no extra garbage involved in it. So let me go over to the table here and show you what I'm going to be doing with the fish. I have 2 cups of jasmine rice in this bowl here. The jasmine rice I have, literally I got from Sam's Club. It's a 25-pound bag. It has to be boiled. You have to cook this. Now, coincidentally, I use this 25-pound bag in my backpack when I'm practicing for hiking. So I have a pretty heavy backpack. I got that idea from another YouTuber. All right, so this is already cooked. This is what it looks like. I pretty much figured out the ratio that I need. It's 2 cups of rice for the amount of salmon I have. And as I said, I add Ritz crackers to it, so I need 2 or 3 packages of Ritz crackers. This is the homemade teriyaki sauce. I got this recipe off of a YouTube channel called The Griddle Guys, which they were doing beef teriyaki. In this is 1 1/4 cups of water, 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 cups of sugar, actual ginger root that I cut up, washed off, peeled garlic cloves, 1/2 cup of soy sauce, and I use a Japanese soy sauce, not Kikkoman. You can use whatever you want. I happen to use this because I use this for other cooking. This stuff is really good. I got this at an actual Asian market. There's a couple of dashes of fish sauce in this. That's 1/4 tablespoon of baking soda in here. And that's basically it. This is fresh ingredients. And again, the salt content from the fish sauce and the soy sauce, the sugar, and the Ritz crackers that'll be all mixed with this is pretty much how I'm getting through the meal process. Now, will I get sick of this stuff? Oh yeah, absolutely. Having various foods, I can mix up the fish for breakfast. I can have oatmeal for lunch. I can mix and match these things. Now, one other thing my wife pointed out is that we're going to need a little bit more carbohydrates. So the noodles from the Hamburger Helper are not just going to be it. So what I'm going to do is make homemade macaroni and cheese on top of that and freeze dry that. And that's going to be my in-between meals for excess carbohydrates or protein or whatever. This gives me 2 runs in the freeze dryer. So it'll take me 4 days to complete all the batches of the fish. Now, because I'm going to need an excess amount, for pretty much the next 10 months, I'll be doing nothing but fish in the freeze dryer. Because the oatmeal, I can make mass batches of that. I have so much oatmeal and brown sugar and peanut butter right now, it's ridiculous. But the Hamburger Helper, I usually get 15 boxes of that, and that makes like almost 15 bags. So what I'm going to wind up doing once I near the end of getting the fish done at the end of 10 months, I'm going to spend the same amount of money on Hamburger Helper just to equate out all the amount of food I have. So I'm pretty much going to have an equal amount of brown sugar, oatmeal, and peanut butter, fish, and Hamburger Helper. Those are the main 3 things, and I'm going to get so sick of those, but that basically comes with the territory. Okay, so let me get into showing you the fish here. Okay, so I got skinless salmon. These pieces are freaking huge. There were 3 gigantic pieces of this. So this is pretty much 1 piece. As you can see, the size of it, it's huge. And all of this, once I make it in the pan, will fill that entire crock pot base. Let me explain what I'm doing with this fish here so you can get a full understanding of exactly how I'm going to stretch it out. So first things first, I wait for the wok to heat up. And once I put that in, I'm going to let that cook for a bit, and then I'm going to mash it up so it's in pieces. It's going to be basically shredded. Shredding it allows me to package it more, and sorry, I'm kind of like doing this. Shredding it allows me to, fit more in the package. So let me show you here. Eventually what happens is all the oil from this starts coming off. So let me show you what I'm doing here. I'm literally mashing it up. Now, a lot of people are like, oh no, that's because, again, I want it shredded. This allows it to cook better. I like my fish a little white. So what I'm doing is I'm cooking this so it's completely white. A lot of people say that's overcooked. Yeah, it may be, but I don't want to wind up getting sick on the trail from like uncooked fish. I need to get in this condition and things like that. I don't add anything to this. I just straight up cook it as it is. As the fish starts getting a bunch of oil in it, and there's a ton of it, I take some paper towels and I rub it around the inside of this to absorb most of the oil. Oil doesn't freeze dry. So I need to absorb as much of that oil as I can. It's not going to retain, it's not going to wreck the flavor of it, but it will allow it to freeze dry much, much, much easier. Okay, so one of the things I forgot to mention about freeze drying is that when you're freeze drying, unlike dehydrating, maintains 98% of the nutrients in food, unlike dehydrating, which strips almost 50% of it out. So that's the benefit for freeze drying. Once I'm done frying all these up, I'm going to put them in that over there. I'm going to mix them up, and then I'm going to add in Ritz crackers. And there will be some oil left over in this, but the rice will absorb it, and that'll make it nice and flavorful. I know people say this is sacrilege by chopping it up, but again, you'll start to see exactly what's going on here when I finish this. This is pretty much ready to go into the crock pot over there. Again, I'm only using the crock pot to stir it up. I'm not cooking it in the crock pot. One other thing I forgot to mention is the fish here that I have. I washed it off in the cold water and I patted it dry with a bunch of paper towels. I forgot to mention that. I'm going to take this off. I'm just going to dump it right in just like that. So pretty much after I get all that salmon put in, I'm going to mix this up so the rice and the salmon are all mixed well. And again, 2 cups of rice, for some reason, equates the exact amount of rice to fish ratio that I love. Sorry, I'm kind of turning this into a cooking show. So let me go back over there, and I'm going to put in another piece of fish. And the same exact thing, I'm just going to keep putting this in. I'm going to put this in the fridge now because I don't want this completely at room temperature. So once I get all that fish done in the pan, I'm going to go over and mix it together with the rice. I'm going to put some Ritz crackers in it. I'm not going to completely shred the Ritz crackers. I'm going to leave them in pieces so they absorb the teriyaki sauce that I'm going to put in it. And then once that's done, I start the freeze dryer. I load up the trays, and then it's a matter of just waiting, 28 to 30 hours before it's done. It doesn't really need 30 hours, but I usually do it just to absolutely make sure it's 100% dry. So while I'm waiting for this fish, let me show you another thing that I'm taking with me. All of those jars are coffee. I very could have easily used instant coffee, but here's the thing with this. The amount of stuff I'm having to take with me, I need to reduce so I have straight up everything instant. All I need to do is add water. This is actual Folgers that I have mixed with French vanilla cream and the right amount of sugar, so I already brewed it. And then once I freeze dried it, I powderized it. This has the exact ratios of sugar and cream that are perfect for me. And because they're powder, I can actually make it as strong or as weak as I want to. And so I will be filling Mylar bags with these, and I have a way to measure out exactly how many cups I'm going to basically be able to get out of a bag. And then I will be able to multiply that to how many bags I'm going to go through a week. And basically that's it, because I have a way to measure the food that I'll go over. But for now, let me continue cooking the fish here. Okay? There's a little bit of excess oil in here, but I'm not worried about it because there's a lot of rice in the bottom of this. But normally I would get all that excess oil out with a paper towel. So as you can start to see exactly why I broke it up. I mean, I explained it, but now you're starting to see it. So as you're starting to see, the difference between store-bought freeze-dried stuff and this is a world of difference. Let me finish cooking all this fish up, and I'll get back to you. As you can see here, I am pretty much done with the remainder of the fish. What I've been doing for the past couple of pieces is I take a rubber spatula and a dry paper towel, and I rub it around the inside here to get all the excess oil off of the fish. I may need another paper towel to get the remainder of the oil out of this. And as you can see from this, how wet it is. Look at how much oil is coming off of that. It's ridiculous. So I'm going to get another paper towel and get the rest of the oil out of here. The marinade, the teriyaki that I have, that's going to go in this will make it moist. And the flavor will be really good. This is why I wasn't flavoring any of this. I wasn't adding salt, pepper, garlic, or anything of that nature to this, because the Ritz crackers and the teriyaki will do this up nice. So as you can see, there's so much oil in this, it's ridiculous. So I'm going to use the rest of this, get this out. Then I'm going to pour this in and start up the Ritz crackers. So bear with me, okay? I want to give you a close-up of the rice to salmon ratio in this before the Ritz crackers are added here. The amount of rice to salmon in here is good. So I'm going to finish mixing this up a bit, and then I'm going to start adding the Ritz crackers to it. And then the final thing is the marinade. I'm going to take back, and I'm just going to bang these up on the table here like this. So as you can see, they're in pieces. The final ingredient in this is going to be the marinade. Let me give you a close-up of exactly what this looks like. You can see it in here, the Ritz crackers, salmon, the rice. Now, the only flavoring this has in it right now is the Ritz crackers. Because it's fully cooked, I can eat this. Even after it's freeze-dried, I could just literally take pieces of it and eat it. This is the fresh marinade that I had made. I'm just gonna pour it over the fish here. I know that seems like a lot, but I want this dark, and there's a lot of fish in here. What's really interesting about this is that teriyaki, for some reason, when it mixes with the Ritz crackers, becomes insanely good. Let me mix this up. I'm going to probably use more than this. I might actually almost wind up using the entire thing. Even though I'm going to be the only one eating this, I still want gloves, because in case somebody may want a taste of this. So now you're starting to see just exactly how much food this makes. I'm going to finish mixing this up. Then I'm going to show you setting up the freeze dryer. Then on top of that, I'm going to show you the finished product. I do have some of this already set up in Mylar bags. So I will go over all of that in a bit, as well as show you the exact measurements I'm using to eat, and I'll explain all that afterwards. This is how much marinade is left. That's a lot I used, but I wanted to make sure it was all coated. So as you can see, it looks a little gray, but I did taste this, and it's really, really good. So what I'm going to do for now, I'm going to start the freeze dryer. I'm going to bring you over for that. Now, the freeze dryer has to start cooling down the inside chamber for about 15 minutes. So I turn this on in the back here. There's a switch back here. It's back there. I have a fan here because this is the pump and it gets really hot. So I use this fan to cool the pump off. So this is now on here. I'm going to set this to freeze and then do extra dry time. Now I want to get this up between like 33 hours. This is the initial freeze I want it set at, because freeze drying, you have to literally freeze something between -30 and -50 for it to properly freeze dry. For the dry temp, you want to leave it 125. And then I just put extra dry time at 6 hours. This will run a full cycle of 24 hours for the most part, and then the additional 6 hours. And then once it goes, I will break it up to make sure it's spaced out. I'll kind of rearrange the trays because heat rises. Sometimes the bottom tray doesn't heat up as much. Once I get this dried and meshed up, I'll re-crumble it up so it's kind of like relaying it back out to dry further. So when it basically hits between 31 and 33 hours, I will actually take it out, vacuum seal the Mylar bags, which I'll show you what this looks like afterwards. While this is getting ready, I'm going to put the fish on the trays here. So what I'm going to do is show you with one tray, and then I'm just going to replicate that with all 4 trays. I'm going to try to evenly distribute this stuff between these trays. Now this is going to give me 2 freeze dry runs. It's going to fill up 4 trays twice. And so pretty much this is going to take about 4 days to do this entire batch. So let me get this set up. I'll pause the camera, get all 4 trays set up, show you the end result, and then I will get the very, very, very end result of how this stuff is bagged and things like that for the Mylar bags. A general rule of thumb is, however much water or moisture is taken out, when you want to rehydrate it with hot water or cold water or whatever, is how much water you have to put back in. Usually people will weigh their food before and after. They would use the difference to know exactly how much water gets added back in. So for example, if this weighed 12 ounces before it's freeze dried, and after it came out of the freeze dry, it weighed 6 ounces, that means 6 ounces of moisture is removed. So you add 6 ounces of moisture back to get the full 12 ounces again. And a lot of people have a problem thinking that this is all mush. And that is because they're not used to moisture being removed from the food. So what happens here is you're not adding moisture to like bread to make it soggy. That's not what happens. What you're doing is you're putting back in the moisture that was taken out so it winds up regular. I know that sounds weird, but that's just how this works. So for the time being, let me get these 4 trays set up. Okay, so the freeze dryer is just about ready for the chamber that's cooled down for 15 minutes. Now these trays probably weigh about 1.5 pounds a piece, but they'll weigh much less once they come out of the freeze dryer. So I'm going to take you over and show you this now. This is the final tray, and all I'm going to do now is shut the door, and then I hit continue up here. And then this just runs its course for about 1.5 days. When this is done, I'm going to show you what the finished product, all packaged stuff, looks like in the Mylar bags. Here is going to be the finished product between the 3 meals I'm taking. The brown sugar oatmeal, the hamburger helper with crackers in it, and the teriyaki salmon rice. This is salmon and rice. As you can see, it's sealed up. Now, when I pack these up, by the way, in case you hear anything, my wife's making dinner over outside. This doesn't seem like much in here, but believe me, it's a lot. I'm going to seal this and remove this top excess so I don't have all this excess stuff. So I'm basically just going to have little packets. The amount of protein in this supersedes at least 3 to 5 of the ones that you could buy in the store because it's straight up food, as I explained and showed you in the video. This is the peanut butter and brown sugar oatmeal. There's a lot in here. And so again, I'm just going to seal off the edges of this and then cut the excess off of this. This is the beef hamburger helper. As you can see, this doesn't seem like much, but there's a lot in here. Now, how I'm allotting this food is very simple. This is a 12.5 ounce container. Now, I know this works because when I was doing my explorations of the abandoned buildings and everything else, I prepped my own food and took it with me. So I know that filling this up all the way here and then about half will fill me perfectly. So that's how I'm going to divvy these out. One of these will be for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then there's an in-between snack with the macaroni and cheese here and there. And again, I can mix and match all this stuff for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It doesn't matter. So I can alternate how this works. Somebody managed to figure out how to freeze dry peanut butter. So I'm going to try that as an experiment because if that works, I'll be packing a couple of bags of that because that is insanely good. And in case everybody's wondering why I'm doing all of this dried stuff, it's because it's instant food. Like the coffee I explained. I already have the measurements of the cream, the sugar, and the coffee the exact way I like it. So I don't have to carry coffee, sugar, and cream. It's already mixed in and it's good to go. So I literally used brewed coffee and turned it into instant coffee by putting it in the freeze dryer. So again, I have a way to measure that, which is off of the Jetboil because there's a cup on the bottom of that I'll be using for the coffee. So what I'm going to do is an experiment with the excess left over that you saw in the jar. I'm going to put some in there and figure out how many cups that's going to need. And then what I'll do is I will scoop out how many scoops go in that cup. And that way I can figure out how many cups a bag will make. Now, hiker hunger is eventually going to kick in. And I'm going to need a little bit more, which is, again, where the macaroni and cheese comes in. Because it's going to be a go between breakfast and lunch and then lunch and dinner. So I can basically eat 5 times a day. So what I had planned on doing was taking about 2 weeks of food with me per segment. So I will not have to resupply that much or that often. Basically, I'm going to have about 9 to 12 bags with me. And like I said, I will figure out by measuring out how much I need comes out of each bag and then figuring out how long this bag will last. So if I get like 3 of these out of this bag, that means this bag will only last 3 days. Same with this, and the same with this. And again, I'm going to attempt peanut butter because that's going to be another fill-in food, as well as I can eat, everything's already cooked. I can just eat it as is. And the Jetboil I fill this up, fill it up with water, cover it, and let it sit. And by the time I either pick my camp up or getting ready for bed or whatever it is, or setting camp up, this will be done. And this will give me so much nutrients and so much protein. It's utterly absurd. So that is basically the difference between store-bought freeze-dried stuff and homemade freeze-dried stuff. As you can see, I can fill an overabundance of food in this. And this is going to be really, really good. My wife had mentioned that I should use more macaroni. She was correct on that. So I'm going to make homemade macaroni and cheese on that. It's really cheap. I can make it in bulk quantities, and that's it. So for the next 10 months, I'll basically be making the salmon and the Ritz. And then 1 month, I'm going to get the amount of money I would have spent for the fish is going to be the amount of money I'm going to spend for the hamburger helper, because I will be able to make it pretty much during the week and during the month. Because right now I can only do the fish once a month, and I'm only getting about 6 to 8 bags out of that. So by the time I'm doing 10 months, I should have like 60 bags of it or something like that. It's going to be ridiculous. The amount of it's going to be completely ridiculous, but that's what's needed to do this. And also on the trail too, this isn't just everything. There's Trail Magic, which, supplied by Trail Angels, things like that. You'll get to eat regular food. And on occasion, I'm going to go into town and eat because I'm going to need to do my laundry and everything else. So this is not going to be completely everything I need. But you want to make sure that you have basically a bag a day is what it comes down to. So if you're going to be on the trail 200 days, make 200 bags. But that's a combination of everything. And that's basically it. So now that you understand the difference between freeze-dried store-bought stuff and freeze-dried home stuff and how the freeze dryer works, hopefully this will clear up some misconceptions for you. Having a freeze dryer in general is just worth it, because I have a lot of stuff we want to freeze dry, like asparagus and stuff like that, because we have an overabundance of food. We go food shopping once a month like this, and then we just freeze dry the rest of it, and it just lasts for months. I ate scrambled eggs in there that were sitting there from last year. Oh, and one other thing about this is there is a oxygen absorber inside these bags. So not only is the air out of this from vacuum sealing it, but the oxygen absorber takes the rest of the air out and keeps the food from getting spoiled. One other thing about Mylar bags is animals really can't smell through this, but you still need to use a bear box. But the difference here is it's really hard for an animal to smell through Mylar. Again, when you have to use a bear box, make sure you do it. I will be taking probably an Ursac. That's going to be both critter and bear proof. I'm going to get a good one. And so I will be putting the remainder on my food in that. But for the most part, anything that's not open, I could just leave on my tent. They will never find it. They won't smell it because there's almost no oxygen. And these are Mylar bags, which animals really can't smell through. So that's another bonus to this. Okay, so I know I showed you the finished product, but I wanted to show you what actually happens and what it looks like once the freeze drying process is done. So this has been running for approximately 33 hours. It's in the corner over here. I don't know if you can read that. Now, this is going to get a little noisy because remember I said this is in a vacuum. So right now this door is vacuum sealed. So I have to hit this lever over here. I'm going to point out the moisture that goes on this is on the sides of this. This is all ice. These are warm and this is all iced. So again, the moisture gets sucked out of the food after it's been turned into a gas, pushed to the side, and then refrozen so it can't get back into the food. So I'm going to bring these over to the table, so bear with me. If you remember, I said these trays were basically 1.5 pounds. They weigh less than that now because there is no moisture in any of this. As I said, when most of the drying time was done, I break it up, I redistribute it on the tray, and then I put it back in the freeze dryer for an additional 2 to 3 or 4 hours of drying time. So it's completely dry all the way through. And you can always tell when something is properly freeze dried because there's no cool area on it. And this is cool area within the food, not the tray, because the tray eventually gets cold if you leave it sitting in there, but that doesn't mean there's moisture in it. But the food itself needs to be very warm and dry. So this is all set to get packaged up. I have my bag sealer here. I have the other bags here. Once it's done, I put an oxygen absorber inside each bag and I seal it. Once I seal it, I then have to wait for the machine to defrost so I can vacuum seal the bag and get it in its final stage ready for packaging or mailing or whatever. So let me get this all packaged up right now and I'll get back to you in a second. So now what I've done is I've taken an oxygen absorber and I just place it in just like that. I've done the same thing with all 4 of these. Just make sure that there's no real wrinkles in this. So that way when I put it in the freeze dryer, I can vacuum seal it pretty much equally. And now what I'm going to do is seal this up the top. Run the sealer on this. That's it. When the light goes out, it's all set. This is now sealed. I'm going to repeat the process with all 4 of these. Now all I have to do is wait for the freeze dryer to finish defrosting, and that way I can seal up these so they have a good seal on them. And then I can get the second batch of the salmon and rice and put it in, and then just repeat the procedure. So when that's defrosted, I'll come back and I'll show you the process of what it looks like when one of these bags gets put into the machine, because a lot of people don't realize that you can actually vacuum seal Mylar bags in that machine because it's a vacuum. So when that's done defrosting, I'll bring you back and then I'll show you. So hang tight. Okay, so I basically defrosted the freeze dryer, and I have a lot of the components taken out of it because the freeze dryer does require a little bit of maintenance, so I'm going to go over that now. The first thing I want to point out is, since this is a pump, it requires oil, and the machine lets you know when the oil needs to be changed. So as you can see, there's a message flashing. Pump oil needs to be changed, which I already did. This gets permeated with whatever you freeze dry in it. So right now, it smells like salmon. And so in order to clean this, this is a mixture of rubbing alcohol and water. And not only will that sterilize it, but it gets rid of the smell that's in there as well. And this can go right on the glass door here, on the inside and the out. So I'm going to dry this off right now, then get to the second part of vacuum sealing the bags. There's a bucket that I have and a hose that's connected to this, and there's a drain hole down here on the back. That's where all the water goes after you defrost it. And so you have to be careful not to have water in that bucket, because when you release the vacuum on this, everything gets sucked back up in the hose and put out. So the hose usually has some residue in it. And so what I normally do first is I vacuum seal the jar that has the oxygen absorbers in it. And that way, that sealing of that jar does a run to get all the excess moisture out of the hose that's back here. So hold on a second. I put the rubber seal back on the drum. What you do is you take this cap, loosely put it on, and put it almost tight. Then you put it inside. Now, the one other thing I forgot to mention that rubbing alcohol and water does is it doesn't strip the finish off of the stainless steel drum. Whereas using soap and water or a mild detergent or anything else eventually breaks down the stainless steel coating and it can start to rust. I actually learned that information off of another YouTube channel called Fillet 4800 Feet. All right, so this is going to get a little loud. I just want you to hear that it's not as loud as you think it is. But what I'm going to do is do the vacuum element of this, which is right here. I'm going to let that run for about 1 minute and 30 seconds, which should seal the jar. And after that, it'll get any excess moisture in the hose back out, because if any moisture gets into the food that you just freeze-dried, it'll wreck the batch and you'll have to do it over again. Okay, so this is basically running at 1 minute and 30 seconds. And then there's a valve over here which releases the seal on this, because right now if you try to open this, you can't. It's vacuum sealed. As you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but there's water droplets all on the inside of it. That's all the excess moisture from inside the hose. Again, if that food was in there, all that would have been into the food. So it's good that I did it with a jar. If this is done properly, this should be sealed. Sometimes it doesn't work, so I have to do it again. Okay, this is sealed, which means the oxygen absorbers are safe now. So that was done properly. Well, apparently I found out why there was so much water in that. Is the valve, when I shut it, there was water, a bunch of water that had drained out that wasn't actually in the bucket. So an excessive amount of water came back up through. So what I have to do is, since that water was there and it came up, I have to re-spray the underside of this with rubbing alcohol. So give me a minute. This stunk again. The water stinks to high heaven. And the main reason why I'm going through all of these steps is to show you what it actually takes to, when you have a freeze dryer, it sounds all well and good, but there is some maintenance to it, and you do have to take care of your machine. Again, this is a $3,000 machine. I want to be in real time showing you things, because as I said, this episode was going to be excessively long, and it was going to mainly be talking about freeze drying. I'm going to put the seal back on this. This is just a rubber seal. And I'm going to go get a bag for the salmon, and I'll show you what winds up happening. After sitting for a while, the bags, when I put them together, they were puffed out. The oxygen absorber in this is actually sucking the air out to remove the remainder of it. So I'm going to get this ready to vacuum seal. In order to do this, is you have to cut the corner of this off. Now, I still have the heat sealer on the table there, which I'm going to, after I get this out, I immediately have to run it over to the heat sealer to keep the seal on this to prevent any air from getting in. And this just gets folded over, right like this. And then it's put into, on the same process I used for the jar. Just put that in. I have to close the valve. And then I just run this for approximately a minute and 20 seconds. I'm going to let you see what happens to the bag in here. If it starts expanding excessively, that means I don't have the hole cut right in the bag, and it looks like this is too excessive. Because you don't want it to overexpand. Okay, I have to stop this. I have to cut the hole in the bag a little bit larger. Once you've been doing this for a while, you get to understand what does and what doesn't work. Getting it a little bit more. Yeah, so like I said, I wanted to be in real time to show you what this is actually like. Once you have all this, this will have a shelf life of approximately 20 years, as long as it's kept in a dry, dark place. Cool, too, I should say. Let's try this again. It's too bad you can't see it in here, but you can see the mist coming off because it's a combination of hot and cold. And so it's pretty interesting. So this looks like this is basically where you want it, because as you saw last time, it just literally puffed up. So what I'm going to do is let this run for about a minute and 30 seconds. Okay, so this is running for about a minute and 30 seconds now. Now what's going to happen is, once I've released the vacuum on this, the bag will shrink. You'll see it. I'm going to take it out, I'm going to go seal it. But for now, I want you to see, this is like a brick at this point. You see how compact it got? I got all the air out. So I'm going to go seal this. Give me a minute. Okay, so what I did was I sealed the corner that the bag that I cut, and this allows it to be basically like a brick. There's no air in this at all, and then the oxygen absorber will keep it fresh. So this now has a shelf life of approximately 20 years. So again, I'll be taking these on my trip to the Appalachian Trail, and hold tight because I'm going to do the other 3 bags on this. I want to point out that for some reason there's still water coming up through this, and I have no idea why. This is one of the good things with the test run for vacuum sealing, because again, I don't want this water in my food. I know I keep drilling this home, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is the downside of having the freeze dryer. One other thing I want to point out about the Mylar bags that's good is that they're waterproof. So there's no, I know that started weird because I said don't get the food wet, but this food is in a protective bag, that the bag itself, I can drop that bag in a stream and it'll be fine. No water will get into it because it's sealed. Unless there's a hole in the bag, then it's protected from moisture at all times. So I'm going to get the other bag ready. Same deal. Cut a corner of this off. Right about there should do it. Sometimes you have to play with this. I've actually had to seal this side and then cut the other side. And then on top of that, I've actually had to change the bag completely, so I had to use a new bag. It's a pain in the ass at times. Let me get this in. You only want to do one of these one at a time. Again, it's a little time consuming. And it's off. This is bag number 2. Kind of cool how it just goes whoop. I'll be able to tell. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the seal breaks when you got to do it again. All right, so this is good. Bag number 3. You're not going to get them perfect, but you want to try to get them as flat as you possibly can. And I'll be back when this is done. Okay, bag number 3 is done. Or I hope it's done. Sometimes because it's so crispy, when you open it, you can hear it. I should say dry, not crispy. All right. Yep. And finally, the last bag. Okay, it looks like bag number 4 is done. This one may not work right. Who knows? Because I don't think I cut it right. If the hole is cut too big or too small, it pops up to an insane amount. Actually, it looks like this was done just right. Give me a minute, I'll be right back. Those 4 bags getting vacuum sealed. Again, tests to find out if any excess water or moisture is in it. It's been good for the past couple of times I've done it. What I'm going to do now, get the rest of the fish on the 4 trays, and I'm just going to repeat the procedure that I did at the beginning. So I don't really need to rehash all that again, but I just wanted to show you the full process from start to finish on exactly what I'm doing to take the food with me, the importance of freeze drying, stuff like that. So that being said, that's basically it. I will see you in the next episode, whenever I post that, and that'll be episode 7 for whatever I'll be going over. That's it. Till then, Math 360 Investigations signing out. Take care.